Welcome to the deep dive. We're really thrilled to have you joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
So we have a very specific mission for you today. We are going to completely dismantle this massive myth that achieving high-level success simply requires working, 100-hour weeks and just blindly worshiping the grind.
Yeah, the whole hustle culture trek.
Right. If you've ever felt like you're constantly running on a treadmill, like you're exhausted, endlessly busy, but somehow not actually getting closer to your biggest goals, this conversation is custom built for you.
It really is, because the
What is that?
busyness doesn't always equal progress.
Exactly. So we're pulling from two incredibly revealing frameworks today. First, we've got a breakdown of an ultra-efficient, almost absurdly simple productivity system that was originally used by a student to get into both Harvard and Yale.
Which is a wild story on its own.
It totally is. And second, we have an in-depth analysis of the unfair advantage framework, which explores how outside success is actually constructed behind the scenes. So, okay, let's unpack this because I'm genuinely so excited to look at success from these two completely distinct angles.
It's such a phenomenal pairing.
Right. You've got the raw mechanics of your daily focus on one side, and then the leverage of your unique life circumstances on the other.
Fundamentally, this deep dive is about recognizing that true success equals working hyper-efficiently with the specific, unequal hand you've been dealt.
Unequal being the key word there.
Exactly. It's about stripping away the illusions of productivity and really the myth of a perfectly level playing field so you can actually start moving the needle in your own life. We spend so much time pretending that effort alone dictates the outcome, which leads straight into our first major trap.
The trap of confusing being busy with actually being productive. It is so incredibly easy to fill up a calendar with endless activities.
Oh, yeah.
You answer 50 emails, you make a dozen phone calls, you reorganize your digital workspace for the fifth time, and you convince yourself that you are hustling. You feel exhausted at the end of the day, so you assume you must be making progress.
What's fascinating here is how often we base our productivity systems on feelings and emotions rather than objective output.
Right.
We engage in what the source material calls feel-good work. We do things simply for the sake of feeling productive without ever evaluating if the action serves the ultimate goal.
Like the morning routines.
Yes. Think about the cultural obsession with these hyper-optimized morning routines.
Oh, they are everywhere.
You wake up at 4:30 a.m., you meditate, you journal your affirmations, drink cold water mixed with sea salt and electrolytes.
Follow it up with hot coffee blended with grass-fed butter.
Right. Take an ice bath and then force yourself to go on a 10-mile run.
And by the time you finally sit down at your desk, it's 9:00 a.m. and you feel like you've already conquered the world. You're exhausted but proud.
Exactly. But if your actual goal for the year is to write a novel, you have to look at that agonizing morning routine and face a really uncomfortable truth.
Which is that absolutely none of those activities wrote a single word of your book.
Not one word. The word count on your manuscript is still zero.
Zero. You might feel like an absolute champion, but the only thing that gets the book written is sitting down at a keyboard and typing. Everything else, no matter how grueling it is just a highly elaborate, socially acceptable form of procrastination.
It's productive procrastination. And to combat that, the Harvard-Yale Productivity Framework introduces a radically simple countermeasure called the inverted pyramid method.
I love this method.
It's brilliant because it completely rejects complex scheduling, the color-coded calendars, the meticulous hour-by-hour planning. It forces you to confront the actual work.
The mechanics of the inverted pyramid are so effective because they are incredibly restrictive. You start your day with your absolute most important task, and you dedicate the vast majority of your energy to it.
The baseline suggestion is a 3-2-1 system. Right.
Yeah, the 3-2-1 system. You allocate 3 uninterrupted hours to your biggest needle-moving task. Once that's done, or the 3 hours are up, you move to the second most important thing for 2 hours.
And then 1 hour on the third most important thing.
Exactly. You put your phone on airplane mode, set a timer, and you just go. But, and I know this is true, some people listening right now hear 3 tasks and instantly feel their chest tighten with overwhelm.
Sure.
For those people, the rule is modified to be even simpler. Just do one thing.
And that one thing modification is where the real breakthroughs happen. The source shares this great anecdote about an attorney who desperately wanted to transition her career and write a legal thriller.
Oh, this is a perfect example of feel-good work.
It really is. She had the legal expertise, she had the concept, but instead of actually writing the narrative, she spent months endlessly researching historical case law. Now, in her mind, Research feels productive. It feels entirely necessary to write a good book.
But she had totally put the cart before the horse.
Completely. She was researching endlessly to avoid the vulnerability of facing a blank page. If you are researching, you can't fail.
Right, you can't write a bad chapter if you're just taking notes on a 1990s court transcript.
Exactly. The inverted pyramid forces you to ruthlessly identify the one single action that moves you from point A to point B in the most direct way possible and ignore everything else that simply makes you feel busy.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because once you accept that you should only be focusing on tasks that actually move the needle, you inevitably run into the Pareto principle.
The famous 80-20 rule.
Right, we all know the 80-20 rule. We've heard it a million times.
Yeah.
But looking at the data from the sources, it is wild how rarely people actually apply it to their own workflows. We just nod along and then go right back to doing 100% of the work for 100% of the results.
It usually sounds like a corporate buzzword until you look at the raw numbers. Let's look at the law firm mentioned in the breakdown. They wanted to scale their revenue while reducing their partners' working hours.
Which sounds impossible on paper.
Right? So they audited 5 years of past settlements and client acquisition data. Going in, they just assumed their extensive marketing campaigns and aggressive cold outreach were keeping the lights on.
Because that's what everyone assumes.
Exactly. But the data revealed something entirely different. 80% of their total revenue, and specifically their easiest, fastest closing cases, came from personal referrals.
Wow.
These were people who already knew the attorneys, trusted their authority, and actually listened to their legal advice without fighting them every step of the way.
Meanwhile, the clients they were pulling in from those expensive cold ads turned out to be the most difficult, time-consuming, combative clients who ultimately brought in the lowest settlements.
The 80% of their marketing effort was yielding a miserable 20% return.
That is brutal.
So the firm made a terrifying but necessary pivot. They entirely scrapped the cold outreach.
Completely cut it.
Yes. They took all that time and capital and doubled down on community networking, dinners, and relationship building. They engineered their entire business model to solely focus on the 20% that naturally worked.
And you see the exact same pattern in individual careers, too. Take the real estate agent from the analysis who was absolutely exhausting himself trying to cover every possible base.
Oh, this guy was doing everything.
Everything. He was writing weekly newsletters, hosting weekend open houses, cold calling expired listings, running a half-dozen social media accounts.
Just burning the candle at both ends.
Totally.
Yeah.
But when he finally stopped moving long enough to analyze his actual closed deals, the results were jarring. Almost all of his commissions were originating from just 2 places: past client referrals and direct messages on Instagram.
I would have instantly dropped the newsletters.
Which is exactly what he did. He completely cut out the newsletters, the cold calling, the endless open houses. He reallocated all those hours back into nurturing his referral network and creating better Instagram content. And of course, his income skyrocketed while his working hours plummeted.
It's just the 80-20 rule in pure action. And it even applies to the hyper-competitive digital space. There's an analysis of a YouTube creator trying to push past the 10,000 subscriber mark.
I remember this one. He was trying to hack the algorithm, right?
Yes, he was obsessing over it. He was buying new camera lenses, tweaking his thumbnail colors by single hex codes, looking for secret editing hacks. But when he analyzed the periods of his most massive growth, the 20% driving all his success was almost painfully boring.
It wasn't some secret algorithmic sauce.
Not at all. It was purely consistency. His channel only exploded when he managed to post 3 videos a week, every single week, without fail.
This raises an important question. I want to put this directly to you, the listener. What stands out to you from your own life? If you look back at any major wins you've experienced, whether that's landing a promotion, excelling in a hobby, or launching a personal project, can you identify the actual mechanics behind those wins?
Because it is rarely a balanced spread of effort.
Exactly. The challenge here is to forensically examine your past successes, find that specific 20% action that tipped the scales, and then ruthlessly double down on it until it stops yielding predictable results.
But doing that requires genuine, ruthless focus.
Yeah.
You can't execute your 20% if your attention is fractured into 1,000 pieces.
No, you really can't.
The documentation on the Harvard-Yale system is incredibly aggressive about the 2 biggest enemies of focus: your smartphone and other people.
The practical protocols here are basically non-negotiable. When it's time to execute your deep work, your phone goes on airplane mode. Ideally, it goes into a completely different room.
But if you absolutely must have it near you for emergency purposes, You have to put the screen in grayscale mode.
Grayscale is a brilliant, totally underrated tactic.
It really is. By stripping away all the bright red notification badges and those vibrant, colorful app icons, you are literally killing the visual dopamine hit that hijacks your brain's reward center. You turn a slot machine back into a simple tool.
Managing a piece of glass and metal is one thing, but managing the people around you is an entirely different beast.
Oh, people are much harder to put in grayscale.
Right. Think about the real estate brokerage mentioned in the sources, the one with the beautiful, modern, glass-walled offices. The brokers would be sitting at their desks, clearly deep in complex contract work or on intense client calls.
People could physically see them working.
Exactly. Yet colleagues would still just open the door, walk right in, and sit down to chat about weekend sports scores or local politics.
It happens because, subconsciously, people often view other people's work as optional. They project their own desire to be distracted onto you.
That is so true.
If you don't set incredibly strict boundaries, if you don't communicate clearly that a closed door means you cannot be interrupted unless the building is physically on fire, your mental bandwidth will be bled dry by 1,000 tiny, insignificant conversations.
I do want to clarify, though, because ruthless focus sounds like you're chaining yourself to a desk for 10 hours straight. You still have to take breaks.
Yes, breaks are essential.
But the methodology behind how you take a break is critical. You cannot let your rest period devolve into a mindless dive into your phone, doom-scrolling social media for cheap hits of dopamine. That doesn't rest your brain, it just fatigues it in a different way.
The neurological data on this is fascinating. If you genuinely want to recharge your cognitive capacity, the science points directly to high-intensity exercise.
We're talking about doing a set of burpees or jumping jacks right there in your office.
Which I know sounds crazy.
I can already imagine the looks from my coworkers if I drop and do burpees in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon slump.
It might look ridiculous, but the physiological payoff is massive. A study in the Journal of Physiology demonstrated that even just 4 minutes of high-intensity exercise dramatically spikes the production of a protein called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
BDNF.
Right. To put it simply, BDNF acts like Miracle-Gro for your brain. It actively helps create and mature new synaptic connections.
So by taking just a 4-minute physical break to elevate your heart rate, you are quite literally upgrading your brain's operating system.
Exactly. You flush out the metabolic waste from intense thinking and reset your neurology for the next block of deep work.
And that neurological reset is vital because it helps combat another massive hurdle we have to talk about, distinguishing between real fatigue and fake fatigue.
Our brains are incredibly deceptive mechanisms.
They really are.
Yeah.
There is a deeply relatable case study about a guy who kept experiencing this sudden, sharp, phantom knee and leg pain. It would ache so badly he couldn't exercise.
But here is the catch.
Right. He only ever felt this highly specific physical soreness on the exact days his workout schedule called for leg day at the gym.
His central nervous system was literally inventing physical discomfort to talk him out of doing the hard, painful work of squatting heavy weights.
That is wild.
And this mechanism happens to all of us, especially in knowledge work. You finally sit down to execute your most important task. Maybe it's drafting that difficult proposal or writing code, and suddenly you feel overwhelmingly tired.
Your eyelids get heavy. You convince yourself you need a nap to be productive later.
But unless you have just finished a grueling 12-hour physical shift, you are not actually fatigued. Your brain is terrified. It is terrified of the discomfort of deep thought, the fear of judgment, or the risk of failure.
So it manufactures exhaustion as a defense mechanism to make you procrastinate safely.
Exactly. You have to learn to recognize that physiological lie and push through the fake fatigue.
Overcoming that fake fatigue gives us the energy to actually do the work. But that brings up a really uncomfortable question. What if you are doing all the hard work? You're focused, you're pushing through the fatigue, but you are playing a game you were never equipped to win.
That's the pivot point.
Right, because it is very easy to say, just work harder. But that assumes we all start from the same place. And that is where our second framework comes in. We often hear that success is just about fair play. Waking up at 3 a.m., hustling harder than the competition, putting in your 10,000 hours.
But fair play is only half the equation.
Exactly. Fair play is necessary, but outsized success requires combining fair play with unfair advantages.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the foundational thesis we have to accept is that life simply is not a level playing field. We all have different inherent strengths, but more importantly, we have vastly different circumstances.
Right.
To map out how this leverage actually works in the real world, We look at the MILES framework. MILES is an acronym representing the 5 major categories of unfair advantages that dictate the reality of success.
Let's walk through them, starting with M, which stands for money. It is very popular to talk about self-made billionaires, but context matters. Take Evan Spiegel, the billionaire co-founder of Snapchat.
The narrative is always that he built a massive tech empire in his 20s through sheer brilliance.
Sure, but if you look at his background, he grew up in a multi-million-dollar house in Los Angeles. He attended elite, incredibly expensive private schools. His parents were powerful, highly successful lawyers.
Which provided him with a casual, unique access to tech CEOs and venture capitalists that a normal person could never dream of getting a meeting with.
Did he work hard? Absolutely. But that massive financial safety net and capital prestige was a profound unfair advantage.
Moving to I, which stands for intelligence and insight. Raw, sheer intellect is a leverage point that cannot be ignored. Look at the Collison brothers, who founded the multi-billion-dollar payment processor Stripe.
Their story is incredible.
It isn't just about a good business model. They were extraordinarily gifted on a genetic level. One brother literally invented his own programming language at age 16 and left high school early to attend MIT.
Wow.
The other achieved the highest standardized test scores on record in his country and was accepted into Harvard before he even finished his final exams. You can study hard, but that level of pure, raw intelligence is a distinct, unfair advantage that allows you to process information and solve problems at an untouchable speed.
Then we hit L for location and luck. I always think of Ray Kroc, the pioneer who turned McDonald's into a global empire. He famously stated that success is about being in the right place at the right time and then actually doing something about it.
Living in a major tech hub like Silicon Valley obviously offers unique networking access compared to living in a rural farming town.
Definitely. But the luck aspect is what I find really compelling. The framework suggests that luck isn't just a lottery ticket. You can systematically manufacture luck.
By increasing your surface area.
Exactly. By taking more action, attending more events, publishing more of your work online, and meeting more people, you are actively increasing your surface area for serendipity to strike.
Which naturally leads into E, standing for education and expertise. Holding a degree from a highly prestigious university offers 3 distinct, tangible benefits: advanced knowledge, a high-value network, and powerful market signaling.
Right. If you are starting a YouTube channel aimed at giving advice to pre-med students and you happen to be a medical student at Cambridge or Oxford, that prestigious institutional brand is an instant unfair advantage. It grants you immediate authority.
However, the modern twist on this is that expertise is no longer gate-kept by universities. You can entirely self-teach a hyper-niche skill online. Your unfair advantage might be the obsessive, self-directed expertise you've built in a very specific coding language or marketing niche that traditional schools don't even teach yet.
And finally, we have S for status. This is about your perceived value in the world. Look at someone like Elon Musk. His outward status and personal brand are so astronomically high right now that if he decides to start any new company tomorrow, whether it's building rockets, digging tunnels, or making a new brand of soda, it is absolutely guaranteed to receive instant global media attention and billions in funding.
He doesn't have to fight for market awareness.
Not at all. That kind of entrenched status is the ultimate unfair advantage.
Now, when you lay out the MILES framework like that, money, intelligence, location, education, and status, it is incredibly common to feel a wave of discouragement.
Oh, absolutely.
You look at billionaires, undeniable child geniuses, and Ivy League graduates, and you look at your own life, and the gap feels insurmountable.
I can practically hear the listener right now saying, well, that is a fantastic breakdown for Evan Spiegel and the Collison brothers, but I'm looking at my bank account and I don't have millions of dollars. I don't live anywhere near Silicon Valley. I didn't go to Harvard. And my social status is basically zero. This framework just proved I have no chance.
And that reaction is exactly where this framework flips the script in a profound way. The core argument is that disadvantages are actually double-edged swords.
Right.
Let's take a lack of money.
Okay.
When a heavily funded, venture-backed startup founder needs to acquire more users, their strategy is almost always lazy. They just throw more millions into the furnace of Facebook and Google ads. They burn cash to solve problems.
Right.
But when you have absolutely zero budget, it forces extreme necessary creativity. He has to rely on guerrilla marketing, viral mechanics, or hyper-personalized outreach. Necessity becomes the mother of invention, and that scrappiness often builds a much more resilient business model.
It's the same with a lack of status. Think about the wealthy kids at elite universities who have their entire lives funded. A lot of them spend their prime years playing video games or partying because they have an ultimate safety net.
They have absolutely zero intrinsic motivation to grind for a job.
Exactly. When you lack status, when you lack financial security, it implants a desperate fire in the belly. It gives you a hunger and a drive to succeed that the comfortable kids simply cannot manufacture, no matter how hard they try.
Even a bad location can be flipped into leverage. If you are building a business in the middle of nowhere, it's true, you aren't bumping into venture capitalists at your local artisanal coffee shop.
Definitely not.
But you also aren't paying the brutal, suffocating $4,000 a month rent of San Francisco. Your cost of living is incredibly cheap. That low overhead gives you a massively longer runway. You have the freedom to experiment, pivot, fail, and slowly build your business over years without the constant crushing pressure of burning through your savings in 6 months.
To really harness this mental pivot, you have to adopt what is called the reality growth mindset. We've all heard of the standard growth mindset popularized by Carol Dweck's studies with school children, the belief that our abilities aren't fixed and we can improve through effort. The reality growth mindset is the adult evolution of that concept.
It requires a delicate balance of deep self-awareness and irrational self-belief. It means having your feet firmly rooted on the ground, meaning you look at the Miles framework and realistically acknowledge that the starting line is unequal, and you might be at a severe disadvantage in certain categories.
But simultaneously, you keep your head in the clouds.
Exactly. Maintaining an unwavering belief in your capacity to grow and maneuver. It means you stop pedestalizing billionaires as if they are alien robots who possess magic powers. But you also remain deeply pragmatic about analyzing and leveraging the specific tools and constraints you actually possess.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize everything we've uncovered from these two frameworks, the ultimate playbook for you, the listener, comes down to this. First, you have to ruthlessly audit your daily actions and completely eliminate feel-good work. Stop researching to avoid the blank page.
Yes, do the actual work.
Second, protect your focus like your future depends on it by setting aggressive boundaries with other people, utilizing 4-minute physical resets, and calling the bluff on your brain's fake fatigue. Third, look backward at your own life, find your 20% leverage, and double down on it.
And finally, use the Miles framework not as a list of things you lack, but as a map of your unique circumstances.
Yeah.
Stop looking at the advantages other people have. Audit the unique combination of constraints, weird skills, and specific environments you possess.
Yeah.
Because that exact combination is where your unique leverage lies.
Which leads us to a final thought we want to leave you with today. Something to really chew on as you step back into your own work. What if the very thing you have been complaining about as your absolute biggest obstacle, whether that is a super tight budget, living in a geographically isolated town, or a total lack of formal, prestigious education, is actually the exact specific constraint you need to force your ultimate 80-20 breakthrough?
What if your biggest disadvantage is secretly your greatest unfair advantage, just waiting for you to realize how to leverage it?
It's a perspective shift that changes absolutely everything.
It truly does.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you some tangible tools to completely rethink how you approach your time, your focus, and your goals. Keep finding your leverage, and take care.